That flag represents something. Men and women have died horrible deaths. Horrible deaths. My uncle being one of them. Shot in the back in Vietnam to protect your very right. We live in a society of wolves. You do not fight back by creating more sheep.
Our next guest says there is no such thing as gun control, only people control. You just saw him giving a passionate speech at a rally in Maryland. Joining us now is former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino. Dan, thanks a lot for joining us. What do you mean there's no such thing as gun control, only people control? Tell me what that means.
Tucker, this is larger ideological ploy by this administration. They're not being authentic with America, whether it's the sequester, health care, or the gun control issue. What they do is they manipulate an emotional crisis, a national emotional crisis, to further an ideological agenda which involves the evaporation, the slow disintegration of your civil rights, your liberties, your ability to live and let live. And it's a disturbing pattern that, frankly, is really starting to get under my skin.
I once read where you said that when you were in the business of protecting public figures, when you went to a place with gun control, you didn't feel safer.
Right. I mean, we have this Downton Abbey class of politicians and bureaucrats who they understand as clear as day that gun control has absolute, which, by the way, is a myth, that they're manipulating the language, gun control, with air quotes, has no effect whatsoever on violence or the ability of wolves in our society to impart violence on you.
A two-tier system where privileged people, Mayor Bloomberg, for example, are surrounded by bodyguards with high-capacity magazines, and the rest of us have to make do with double-barrel shotguns. Is that adequate, do you think? I mean, is the average person safe with no firearm at home?
No, you're not. You know, Tucker, law-breaking folks, outlaws, are outlaws and lawbreakers for a reason. They don't care about the law. The law means nothing to them. In my 17 years in law enforcement, I never, ever arrested anyone or knew anyone who did on a gun crime who had the gun legally. So you have to ask yourself, what's the purpose of this legislation? To disarm law-abiding American citizens, men, women, who just want to defend themselves and act within the scope of the law? You know, that Constitution means something, or it should. And apparently it doesn't to this administration.
Now, there's a move apparently afoot to disarm returning veterans. Tell me what you know about that.
Yeah, I read this story. You know, this is absolutely incredible. You know, I have a friend, my friend Mark, who a wounded warrior, was literally severed in half. He had a grenade belt on and stepped on an IED. And he likes to hunt. And I thought to myself, so this man gave life and limb to protect our civil liberties, and then he comes home and with no judicial review whatsoever, a VA official, a bureaucrat, gets to determine if he's allowed to have his own civil rights back, his own right to self-protection. Does that not bother anybody? And it's unfortunately epidemic, though, in this administration and this new political aristocracy that we live in.
Here, I just want to read a quote from the letter to vets from the executive branch. Quote, "A determination of incompetency will prohibit you from purchasing, possessing, receiving, or transporting a firearm or ammunition. If you knowingly violate any of these prohibitions, you'll be fined, imprisoned, or both pursuant to the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act." That is a very threatening letter.
Well, Tucker, I know you're familiar with the work of Thomas Sowell. You know, he calls this the vision of the anointed. Here again, here's this bureaucrat, this letter you get from a class of bureaucrats, basically saying what you can and can't do while they do the exact opposite. I mean, we are living in this post-constitutional society right now where somehow they have sold to you, the American citizen, that it's moral, ethical, kind, or generous to disarm you while allowing others, our veterans as well, while allowing the wolves in our society, the criminals, to impart violence upon you at will. And they know that you won't be carrying a weapon in these strict gun control states, one of which I live in Maryland.
That is about the most eloquent defense of the right of self-protection I've heard in a long time. Dan, thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.